Hello Africa and welcome to the CNBC Africa special. I'm Rofwa Madzena and today we're at the launch of the Trans-African locomotive, a train that is set to cross all African borders. In a few minutes, its engines are going to start up, but for now, let's head inside and see what it sets for Africa's economic future.
As a state-owned company, Transnet has a dual mandate. Firstly, to provide a world-class infrastructure, technologies and services in a commercially sustainable manner. And secondly, to help drive South Africa's developmental objectives through job creation, skills development, empowerment of women, transformation, localization, and generally the industrialization of our country. Those of us at the shareholder ministry, together with the Transnet board and Transnet management, are continually considering new initiatives and innovations to reshape the core of the Transnet business. We are very proud of the Trans-Africa locomotive. It is the first born and bred African locomotive. We are thrilled, Mr. President, that you could join us today. Your presence, Mr. President, underscores the importance and significance and just the value of Transnet's work. It is now my honor, ladies and gentlemen, to ask the President to address us.
Some of the critical achievements are in the economic arena, especially regarding infrastructure development. It is important, therefore, that we are today launching this locomotive. Over the past 10 years, South Africa has grappled with the effects of a global economic downturn. We looked to some of our giant state-owned enterprises to keep the wheels turning during this difficult period. Companies such as Transnet and Eskom, with combined assets of more than 800 billion rands, not only employ masses of our people, but also crucially drive infrastructure development. They are at the forefront of technical innovation and the development of valuable African markets.
President Jacob Zuma and the Trans-African locomotive in Pretoria. It's the first train to be designed and built in Africa by state-owned entity Transnet, and it will roll out across the African continent. It has been specifically customized to African conditions, and it will be used on branch lines and shunting yards. This train forms a part of the African Union's long-standing vision to manufacture and supply rail stock in Africa, by Africa, and for Africa. Siyabonga Gama, the chief executive of Transnet, says this is a big step for Transnet and for South Africa, as it looks to become a leading manufacturer and supplier of rolling stock on the continent.
This is a very groundbreaking and pioneering moment for us. We've spent just over 350 million rand in terms of the research and development to create this locomotive. The economic impact is going to be immense to the continent because now for the first time you have a locally built locomotive that understands African conditions, especially in the heat, which can be able to pull up to 8,000 tons. This is a 2,000 kilowatt diesel powered locomotive. African Railways will be able to buy a locomotive which takes up to a maximum of 17 tons per axle on African track. So the 1067 millimeter gauge, or the Cape gauge as it is called, is part of the locomotive network that we have within the African continent, and this one is going to be able to traverse all of these railway tracks.
Tell us a little bit about the conversations you've had with stakeholders on the continent about the locomotive and the opportunities that it offers. Is there tangible interest from other stakeholders, and will you be working together with them to take the project forward?
There is a lot of interest in terms of purchasing this locomotive from different stakeholders across the continent. Importantly, I think we already have orders from 3 different railways. I will not be able to mention them by name at this point, but we have signed agreements with them, and we will be starting the process of actually manufacturing the locomotives for them. So each of the locomotives will be custom painted to represent the particular railway that they represent. So this is a very telling moment for us in terms of the kind of economic impact and the number of locomotives that we could potentially build for the African continent. I'm looking initially in the next 2 to 3 years that we'll probably be able to make about 600 of these locomotives. But the numbers will grow as people buy more of these locomotives, but also it will give its own references to different people, and they will be able to say, this is the kind of locomotive that we want. But also even the mining houses, also people who operate branch lines can be able to take this particular locomotive.
Now, a huge component of any infrastructure project that's taken on by any institution, particularly an SOE, is the opportunities that it will offer for people on the ground. So tell us a little bit about how the initiation of this project is in line with the National Development Plan and it's on some of its goals for 2030.
I think if we start at the African Union level, South Africa has been designated as the rolling stock hub to manufacture these kinds of locomotives. So what is important is that we won't only be able to work with people locally in terms of the multiplier effect of bringing in various components, but also we will be able to partner with other African countries. In their own countries, we will be able to set up OEM type facilities where we can also manufacture these locomotives for them. So as we sit here, there is quite a huge economic multiplier in terms of the kinds of components that make up these locomotives. But the majority of it obviously is homegrown in terms of some of the control systems that have been researched and developed by our own engineers here in South Africa. We and the CSIR are in a dynamic partnership where we are creating very innovative products which are going to put Africa on the map. But we also have local suppliers. There's a lot of work that is taking place in terms of making sure that there's enterprise development. The windows, for instance, that you look at, they are manufactured by a different entity, a South African entity, that we have worked with over the years in terms of different locomotives. So we're quite excited by the amount of employment that we will be able to create. Obviously, what is going to be more important is that we can accelerate the number of orders that we can get from different railways.
Finally, I want to get a sense from you as to what you think the increasing role, the economic role of SOEs is in South Africa going forward. Do you think that they've got a more critical role to play to increase South Africa's economic value as we move forward?
Absolutely. The state-owned enterprises, they play both a developmental role as well as a commercial role. It's important for SOEs to be financially sustainable so that they don't become a burden to the fiscus, so that they do not require guarantees from the government. So we here as Transnet have always been quite mindful that Transnet needs to create the kind of economic activity that does not require any guarantees from the fiscus. In fact, to the contrary, what we do is to assist to lift the sovereign. So in terms of some of the activities that we're doing here, we're also now getting into the export economy, where we can bring in much needed foreign currency into the country so that we're able to propel our country forward.
After the break, we take a look at Transnet's footprint on the continent, which has changed the transportation landscape by rail. And we'll also talk about what it takes to engineer a locomotive of this kind, a first in Africa. Welcome back to the CNBC Africa special. Transnet has been successful in developing a channel of distribution and the maintenance of trains, which has allowed it to provide services across various countries. Currently, Transnet provides and services trains in countries including Botswana, Zambia, Mozambique, and Namibia.
Transnet is one of the major service providers for BR, because most of our locomotives are done overhauling Transnet. Most of our coaches were manufactured by Transnet. Some of the overhaul for wagons is done by Transnet as well. And quite importantly, our passenger train was supplied by Transnet.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this locomotives and the opportunities you think it will open up.
I think these locomotives is what we've been looking for all along, because it sort of integrates nicely into the African region.
So SARA is actually made out of all the railways in the Southern African region, which include your Transit Freight Rail, Botswana Railways, just to mention a few. So we are here today to witness the milestone of Transnet engineering. They've actually developed the first African locomotive. So us as SARA, who are in the Southern African region, were so proud that TE has managed to create and develop a locomotive which is for Africa and made by Africans, as we are trying to promote each other to create employment in the region. So this is something which we really like to say congratulations to TE.
And then when we match up the Trans-African locomotive, match it up against other competitors around the world, is it to efficient quality? Is it top class in your opinion?
This locomotive is very unique. Remember, this is a locomotive which has been developed by Africans who understand our conditions, who understand our terrain. So this locomotive is something which we've been longing for. All the other locomotives we've been actually trying to redesign them and tweak there and there so that they can suit our standards. But this locomotive is a locomotive which is designed for our conditions, and I think it will do well.
And how are the rest of the other railway associations and companies, how are they receiving the locomotive?
I think they are receiving it very well, and they are very happy that finally we've got something which is developed and manufactured here in Africa for our own conditions. So I believe this will also create employment, and will also create an opportunity for young engineers who are joining the industry to join an organization which is actually developing a locomotive for the Africans, and it will also create more employment.
The Trans-African locomotive is just another part of this commitment, as its engineering is made to overcome various infrastructure barriers. It will oil the wheels of commerce and, of course, allow for the flexible maneuvering across sub-Saharan Africa. The man at the heart of it is Thamsanqa Jiyane, the Chief Officer of Transnet Engineering. His team has been at the center of realizing the vision to travel through Cape to Cairo, or through the Pan-African Railway.
This is a freight locomotive that we've just launched. It's been something we've been working on for the last 2 years and a bit, with our teams busy in our research and development facilities which are housed at the CSIR. We've been able to come up with innovations and make sure that we can come up with a locomotive that's properly integrated, where everything that's on the locomotive works. It's a locomotive that is targeted mainly for the African continent, where we are looking at gauges that are between 12 and 16 tons per axle. Because of issues that we've had historically with infrastructure. So instead of getting all the railways in Africa upgraded and renewed, we felt that there's a niche market to providing a solution that deals with the immediate challenges in the continent. So we've designed, and the locomotive has been doing dynamic tests for the last year and a bit. We finished the locomotive around February, March last year. We did static tests, and then we've been working on dynamic tests since then, and all the tests have been completed. It's a locomotive that is ready to go to markets, and we were excited that the President came to launch the locomotive today, and we're ready to sell.
Tell us about the resources that have been used to put together this locomotive. Are they local? Have they been sourced outside? Tell us a little bit about that process.
Transnet Engineering is an entity within Transnet that is into advanced manufacturing and engineering for railways and ports. The people who designed and developed this locomotive are Transnet Engineering employees. As you may be aware, Transnet Engineering has been an original equipment manufacturer for many, many years for wagons, freight wagons and passenger coaches. And the launch of this locomotive today completes our suite of products which we can then take to the rest of the continent. So we are now a fully fledged rolling stock on original equipment manufacturer. We can do freight wagons, passenger coaches and locomotives, as we have seen with the child that we launched today.
And then give us some insights on the infrastructure that the locomotive will be traveling through. So from Cape to Cairo, for example, is our railway infrastructure ready for that kind of transportation?
Actually, this locomotive is designed for the challenges we're having in the continent. As you may be aware, because of underinvestment in infrastructure over the years and the inactivity in the rail business, a lot of our railways in the continent, there's still limitations in terms of tonnage per axle. Where the traditional locomotives are about 18, 19, 20 tons per axle. We've gone for a niche market which is suited for the continent, a locomotive that is light at the same time, that can move huge cargoes, and it can go into yards and also branch lines. It's a locomotive that does not need you. It can even go into single lines, yards that have got single lines. You don't need to turn it around. It's got a cab that is uniquely designed that's able to move forwards and backwards without necessarily being in reverse.
And finally, you mentioned it a little bit earlier in your first answer, but give us a little bit more of an in-depth sense of the interest from other stakeholders on the continent in terms of investing in a project such as this and seeing it introduced into the market sooner rather than later.
As I say, the rest of the continent have been looking for a solution like this. Various railways in the continent are challenged in terms of movement of goods, especially with the type of infrastructure we have in the continent, where there is a need of a lighter locomotive. And traditionally, most original equipment manufacturers of locomotives are into high-end heavy haul locomotives. There isn't anything that's similar to this, which is a light locomotive that can do a heavy haul and at the same time can be used for branch lines. So it's like when somebody launches a new car. There was a BMW that was launched last week, and I know Mercedes is having something in the pipeline, but it's only when you launch where you begin, when the customers begin to experience the product, when then you begin to see a take up in terms of various orders. But there are various railways in the continent who are in advanced discussions with us in terms of supplying this locomotive and other rolling stock products that we make.
And then I must just ask you, how does this differ from the airplane and shipping transportation systems that we have? Is this a more efficient way in your view?
The railways are undoubtedly the most efficient and cost-effective way of moving bulk and cargo from ports to customers in a most efficient manner for the continent. And we still believe that with the ships and so on, they provide a specific need, they deal with a specific need. Then there is still a huge need of railways, and that's why if you look at the rest of the continent, every country you speak to, there is huge plans in terms of investments on railways and the infrastructure that needs to go in so that we can get the benefit that we need and realize the African dream of Cape to Cairo.
Locomotive One, as it's been described by its creators, will be connecting producers to resources and consumers to products all over the continent, and it will contribute to the ever-interesting African growth story. From myself and the team, it's goodbye.